Hello, this is Steven Hour. Yes, we're back with yet another Batman 66 episode review. And today, we'll be reviewing the episode, Louie's Lethal Lilac Time, which is essentially Louie the Lilac's final appearance. So without any further ado, let's head straight into the review. We begin our episode at Ambergris Bay, where Barbara is hosting a party for Dick and his friends. However, Dick and his friends come finding a bit of ambergris, which is essentially whale vomit, which surprisingly has qualities, for some reason, to make perfume pretty well, is retain perfume scent, and the amount they've got will be worth a fortune on the perfume market. Just as they're about to go find more, two gangsters show up at gunpoint and demand they hand over the whale grease. Just as they are leaving with the whale grease, that's what they're calling the whale vomit, essentially, ambergris, Louie tells his boys to take Bruce Wayne and Dick Grayson with them. And as a result, Bruce Wayne and Dick Grayson are captured and are taken away. We then cut to Alfred getting a phone call by Commissioner Gordon, being told that Bruce and Dick have been kidnapped. And even though he is shocked, he has to sadly tell them that Batman and Robin are not here or unavailable. And of course, hang up, opening credits, and we get back to where we left off, where Louie the Lilac and his two henchmen are taking Bruce and Dick to his hideout, which essentially is an abandoned warehouse, which essentially is a factory. They are then put down, and it turns out Louie the Lilac and his female assistant planned to create a perfume made of this substance to sell on the perfume market and corner it, along with the soap market and cosmetics. Essentially, he'll be using his own product to essentially corner certain markets to become a wealthy man. Essentially, he's a gangster racketeering. He then orders his men, though very funny, to kidnap certain animals, where he's then going to have Bruce and Dick perform surgery on these animals to remove their glands and scent pouches. We then cut to in the Commissioner Gordon's office, Gordon and Chief O'Hara and Barbara looking at essentially reels of footage of Batman and Robin's exploits to, come up with a clue to where they are. Now, this is just a lazy scene and actually has no point to the story. But Gordon then gets a phone call that certain animals have been stolen from the Gotham City Zoo, and of course Barbara suspects that something's amiss. We then go to Wayne Manor, where Alfred is having a conversation with reporters about Bruce Wayne being kidnapped. And of course, we get a mention of Aunt Harriet, though we don't really get to see her. Barbara also turns by to go to Alfred and explain how she suspects Louie the Lilac is possibly involved, and I like how Alfred has to hide the red bat phone from Barbara. Just as that's happening, we also see that, courtesy of Alfred, he manages to find the location where Bruce Wayne and Dick are being held, and gives it to Barbara, where she turns into Batgirl. But not before we see the scene where this workman is working her apartment and almost catches her in the act. Just as that's happening, she rides off on her Batgirl cycle. The Batmobile is driving by itself, being programmed by Alfred to be there, and he's sending essentially radio to Bruce, telling about the Batmobile as being on its way. But just as that's happening, Louie the Lilac's henchman comes in with the animals. And he still plans to have Bruce remove the scent pouches from these animals, but Bruce refused to, as it's inhumane. And essentially Louie Lilac threatens to force them into complying with his wishes. But just as that's happening, the Batmobile turns up outside the factory, along with the Batgirl cycle and Gotham City Police Department, with Gordon, O'Hara, and their men all turn up in droves. Alfred gave the location to them, of course pretending to be a person on the bat phone, of course, and surround the warehouse. Louie the Lilac then uses a bullhorn from his lilac boutonniere to tell everyone to leave or Bruce and Dick will die. When they are not looking, Batgirl secretly slips away and heads into the warehouse. However, Gordon, Chief O'Hara, tells their men to stand their ground and not leave until they come back. Lilac's man tells him that the henchmen are still there, but Batgirl is also out there, but they can't see her. Batgirl then makes her way into the building, and a very cheap fight between the two henchmen gets knocked out by Louie the Lilac's invisible knockout spray. Just as that happening, he decides to turn Batgirl into a literal human perfume to greet the police, Batman and Robin when they enter. However, Bruce, seeing this, asks he will gladly perform the operation if he promises not to harm Batgirl. Louie the Lilac agrees, though secretly tells his accomplice that they plan to kill Batgirl anyway. As a result, Bruce and Dick are placed in the basement to go and perform their surgery, and are given glasses of warm water, which Bruce had asked for. It then turns out the reason why, as he puts pellets in these waters, and they begin to unfold, revealing Bat costumes. They then quickly get changed and make their way out of the basement. They head to Gordon and O'Hara, who are waiting outside, and ask for some help in breaking down the door. They then break down the door and we get this bat fight. I personally like this bat fight really well. Despite what I'm feeling with the episode so far, it's a pretty cool bat fight. Batgirl then makes her way out of the vat and joins in on the fight. Louie the Lilac and his henchmen are all knocked out. Louie kinda temporarily joined in the bat fight, though no, not technically. And Batman asks Batgirl to get Gordon, O'Hara and all the men to come and essentially round up all the gangsters. She then heads out. Just as that's happening, Batman and Robin head into the basement. We then cut to Gordon, O'Hara, his men, and Batgirl all come in to apprehend Louie the Lilac and his men, but not before Louie essentially says he will be back, but sadly he won't be. And that's the last time we see Louie the Lilac, and Milton Berle gives that line so great. Everyone, just as Bruce and Dick come out of the basement, they realize, A, Batman's gone, but also the Batmobile. Bruce says that they left as they had pressing business. We end the episode with Gordon, O'Hara, Bruce and Dick all in Gordon's office, and Gordon says he's about to go on a cruise, but they sadly have to reveal that there's a surprise luncheon in his honor next week, and it was supposed to be a surprise, but because they heard that he's going, the only way to make him stay was to tell him. So, as Chief O'Hara says, the cat's out of the bag. Gordon is at first upset about missing on the cruise, but he is deeply touched, and between the four of them, he says he will act surprised at this surprise luncheon. But little did he know he's going to get the biggest surprise of his life when the champion for women's rights, Nora Clavicle, turns up. And by the sounds of it, Gordon might become ex-Police Commissioner Gordon. That's where we end our episode. For this time in the cast, we get to spend more time with Bruce and Dick than Batman and Robin, which is definitely interesting. And this episode should have had the opportunity to have Batgirl spend more of the time in the story, but she quickly gets captured. Alfred is given a bit more screen time, and as usual, Commissioner Gordon and Chief O'Hara are sort of in the background, as always. But of course, and sadly nothing really changes with the main cast, but of course, let's talk about the villain. Louie the Lilac is back, still portrayed by Milton Berle. Despite what I would think of this episode in general, I still really enjoyed Louie the Lilac as a character. Again, my weak spot for gangster characters is obviously my main reason. But I guess I really like the actor. Again, I followed Uncle Milton on a lot of things. And he's just really great here. Will sadly be his last appearance. And even though this is, I'll admit, is a mediocre and lazy episode, it's fun to have him nonetheless. Now, there's behind the scenes when, in the previous episode, I think I didn't mention this, but Adam West and Milton Berle didn't get along at first, but when Adam stood his ground, he became great to work with. So at first he was difficult, but then, they had an understanding, and not only did they become better to work with, but also, I guess, became a little bit more friendly/friends as it went on. So sadly, this is Louie the Lilac's very last episode. I really wish we could have gotten more. For next week's episode, we got Nora Clavicle. I'm personally not a fan of this character, and we are going to find a little bit more about how I personally feel about her and her episode. So we'll stick around for that. Louie's Lethal Lilac Time is another indication of Season 3 having arguably very lazy and mediocre episodes. Whilst I could like Louie the Lilac's first appearance, even I admit this one's pretty substandard. Not that really interesting. I mean, it starts off with, for me, a really interesting premise, but because I could say lack of budget and I guess lazy writing for this episode, it really doesn't go anywhere. And considering this is Louie's last episode, it's pretty shame that this is the episode he sadly went out on. there we have it. That was Louie's Lethal Lilac time. Join us next time when the dynamic trio will be going up against Nora Clavicle. See what you feel, how I feel about that episode. Until next time, this has been the Steven Hour. Tune in to the next Steven channel, for the next Steven time. Ladies and gentlemen, so long for now.